The first time I saw her, she was already in my seat. That might sound petty, but if you've ever been part of a small southern church, you understand, everyone has their seat. Mine was 3 pews from the front, left side, right beside the stained glass window with the dove and the olive branch. I'd sat there for the past 7 years with my husband Daryl on my right and my Bible on my lap. That seat was home. But that Sunday it wasn't mine. She was. She had the nerve to sit there like she owned it, legs crossed, red blouse hugging her like sin, with her Bible opened but untouched in her lap. Her eyes scanned the sanctuary, and when they landed on me she smiled. Not politely. It was that kind of smile that says, I know something you don't. Maybe she did. Before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe for more real stories like this. Powerful, personal, and unforgettable. Now back to it. Daryl nudged me gently when I froze. You okay? He whispered. She's in my seat, I said under my breath. He blinked like he didn't understand. It's just a seat. Just a seat? That's like telling someone their childhood home is just a building. That pew had seen me cry through miscarriages, pray through job losses, and praise through breakthroughs. It wasn't just wood and cushion, it was sacred. But instead of making a scene, I sat 1 pew behind her. My Bible felt heavier in my lap that morning. When Pastor Gerald started his sermon, Guarding the Heart from Hidden Envy, I saw her lean slightly to the side, close enough that her perfume floated back to us. It smelled like peaches and powder. Sweet and soft. And when Daryl chuckled at the pastor's joke, I noticed her glance back just long enough to meet his eyes. Then she smiled again. After service, I stood up quickly, ready to reclaim my place in the unofficial church seating chart for next week. But before I could take a step forward, she turned around and said, Oh, you must be Daryl's wife. I've heard so much about you. My stomach dropped. Sorry, who are you? I asked, forcing a smile. Marissa. I'm new in town. Just moved here from Baton Rouge. Your husband was kind enough to help me find a mechanic last week when my tire went flat outside the grocery store. She extended her hand. French manicured, perfect. I shook it. Hers was warm and firm. Mine probably felt like ice. Daryl cleared his throat beside me. Yeah, she needed help. I told her about our church. Invited her to come this Sunday. You forgot to mention she'd be sitting in my seat, I muttered. Marissa let out a soft laugh like I'd made the funniest joke in the world. I didn't know seats were assigned. They're not, Daryl said quickly, his voice light. Let's not make a thing out of this. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Later that day I couldn't shake it. I replayed the moment over and over while stirring the gumbo in our tiny kitchen. The way she said, your husband. The way she laughed just a little too long. The way Daryl didn't seem the least bit uncomfortable. I decided to check the church's Facebook page, something I rarely do. And there she was. In the pictures uploaded that afternoon. Standing with Sister Reba and the music team, already looking like part of the family. How did she get in so quick? The next Sunday she was in my seat again. This time, Daryl didn't even look surprised. He walked ahead of me and sat beside her like it was normal. I froze in the aisle. People behind me started shifting, trying to get around. I had no choice but to scoot into the pew behind them. The sermon that day was, Love Thy Neighbor. I didn't hear a word. All I could focus on was how her shoulder almost brushed his arm every time she leaned forward. How her laugh carried during the pastor's lighter moments. How she whispered something in Daryl's ear during the announcements and he smiled too easily. After church she hugged Sister Lenora like they'd known each other since childhood. And she hugged Daryl. Not a side hug. A full embrace. Long enough to notice. I stood a few feet away pretending to answer a text. Pretending not to see. I went home and prayed. I asked God to calm my heart. I told myself I was being paranoid. But the next Sunday I got there 30 minutes early. Sat right in my spot with my Bible and a bag of peppermints. She walked in 15 minutes before service and saw me already seated. Her lips twitched just slightly. She sat across the aisle that time. Close enough to be seen. But she still winked at Daryl. Things began to shift at home too. Daryl started working later, said he was helping out more at church. He changed his cologne. He started humming again while he shaved in the mornings, something I hadn't seen him do in years. And once when I asked him why he didn't sit beside me anymore, he simply said, "You seem tense during service." I didn't want to distract you. I said nothing. But the real breaking point came during Wednesday night Bible study. I walked in late from work and there they were, Daryl and Marissa, laughing near the snack table, sharing a plate of cookies, whispering. I stood in the doorway invisible. When Marissa finally noticed me, she gave that same smile. The one I'd seen that first Sunday. The "I know something you don't" smile. And deep down I started to believe she did. I didn't plan to follow them after church. I didn't even realize I was doing it. But the way they lingered outside in the parking lot that night, talking under the lamplight like no one else existed, it did something to me. I watched from the far end of the lot as she touched his arm. And then I saw it. He kissed her hand. Just for a second. But it was enough. Enough to know something sacred had been broken. And that was only the beginning. If this story hit you in the gut already, just wait. Subscribe right now and don't miss what happens next, because the seat was just the first thing she stole. I didn't sleep the night I saw him kiss her hand. Not a wink. I laid in our bed beside Daryl, staring at the ceiling, listening to his soft breathing while my chest tightened like someone was wringing it out from the inside. His hand was resting just inches from mine. But I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Because I couldn't forget what I saw in that church parking lot. Him kissing Marissa's hand like she was something precious, something holy. He hadn't kissed my hand in years. By morning I had convinced myself I needed proof, concrete, undeniable proof that what I saw wasn't just a weird goodbye or a harmless gesture. I needed something I couldn't explain away in prayer. Something more than a hunch or a glance. Because if I was going to confront him, I had to be ready. But what I wasn't ready for was how fast I found it. It started that Saturday during our church's monthly breakfast outreach. Daryl said he'd be there early to help set up tables. He told me not to rush, that he'd save me a plate. I walked into the fellowship hall a little past 9, wearing my blue dress and my fake Sunday smile. I was halfway to the buffet line when I spotted them. Him and her. She was standing too close. Laughing too easily. Holding a styrofoam cup of coffee that he poured for her. The kind of thing a husband does for his wife without thinking. She reached for a napkin and their hands brushed. She didn't flinch. He didn't either. Later when he saw me, Daryl smiled like nothing was wrong. "You made it." "I did," I replied. "Sorry I'm late." "I saved you a seat." It was next to him. But she was on his other side. So I sat across the table instead. She reached for the jelly and offered it to him before I could. He took it from her like they were in their own bubble. I excused myself early, said I wasn't feeling well. Daryl offered to come home with me. I told him I needed rest, not company. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened his phone. I know. That's a line I thought I'd never cross. But I crossed it. And that's when I found it. Not under her name. She was saved in his contacts as M. Just one letter. But the messages were clear. "You were right. I couldn't stop thinking about you after Wednesday." Him, "I can't keep pretending either." Her, "You're not pretending when you're with me." Him, "No, I'm not." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Every bone in my body wanted to scream. To wake him up and ask how long. To demand why. To break something. But I didn't. I set the phone down. Walked to the bathroom. Sat on the closed toilet seat. And cried into a towel until I couldn't breathe. The next morning at church I wore red. Not because I wanted to match her. But because I wanted to look like a woman who knew. She saw me walk in and blinked. She was already in the pew. My pew. Daryl waved me over. I didn't move. I sat 3 rows back. Alone. When the choir began to sing Waymaker, I didn't raise my hands. I didn't close my eyes. I just watched them. How she leaned into him when they stood to sing. How he tilted his head to whisper something. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in that room. But inside something cracked. After service I walked up to him while she was talking to Sister Reba. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice low and calm. "Now." "Yes. Right now." He followed me outside toward the empty picnic tables under the oak tree near the playground. I didn't waste time. I saw the messages. His face dropped. I went through your phone, Daryl. I read them. All of them. Silence. I saw you kiss her hand last week. You didn't even look guilty. He rubbed his face with both hands. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She's not. It didn't start like this. Then how did it start? I asked. Was it the flat tire? Was it when she stole my pew? Or was it when you decided you were too good to sit beside your own wife? I was lonely, he said finally. We've been off. For a long time. And you thought this would fix it? He didn't answer. I gave you everything, I whispered. Even after the miscarriages. Even when you shut down. I stayed. I prayed. I waited for you to come back to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said. And what hurts most is, you let her walk into our church, sit in our pew and take what little we had left. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought maybe he'd move out or she'd back off. I was wrong. 3 days later I walked into Wednesday night Bible study late again. Only this time I wasn't invisible. Everyone looked up. Conversations paused. And there she was, Marissa, standing at the front of the fellowship hall with Pastor Gerald beside her. She's joining the church today, he announced. Let's give her a warm welcome. People clapped. Daryl stood in the back, hands in his pockets. And she smiled right at me. The same smile. But this time I didn't look away. I should have left the church that night. I should have picked up my purse, walked past those folding chairs and those fake smiles and never looked back. But I stayed. Because leaving would have felt like losing, like letting her win. And deep down I wasn't ready to admit I had already lost far more than a seat in a pew or the affection of a man. I had lost peace. I had lost belonging. And I was starting to lose myself. That night after Bible study Marissa was swarmed. Sister Reba brought her banana pudding. Sister Felicia wrapped her arm around her shoulder like they'd raised kids together. Even Deacon Allen cracked a joke about her joining the choir. You'd think they'd all forgotten she'd only been here 3 Sundays. 3 Sundays. That's all it took for her to slide into my church, my pew, my husband's texts, and now into our inner circle like she belonged. I stood there, arms crossed, watching them love her. Watching him watch her. Daryl had the nerve to look nervous when he saw me. Like he wasn't sure whether I'd cause a scene or walk away quietly again. I did neither. I walked straight up to him. Can I talk to you? Outside. He glanced around like I'd just shouted his name across the sanctuary. Do we have to? He muttered. Yes. He followed me out back just like he did days before. But this time I wasn't trembling. This time I was boiling. You let her join the church? I asked, my voice low but firm. You encouraged this? He looked down. It wasn't my decision. Pastor Gerald approved it. But you knew she was going to do it. And you didn't say a word to me. He stayed silent. Do you love her? I asked. He winced. I didn't plan for this to happen. That's not an answer. I don't know, he said finally. I just know that, with her, I feel seen again. Seen? I repeated. Daryl, I've seen you for 11 years. When you were broke. When your mom passed. When you shut me out after we lost the baby. I never looked away. His eyes filled but he said nothing. I don't even recognize you anymore, I whispered. I don't know who you are. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, Tasha. But sorry wasn't going to fix it. That weekend I went to Mama's house. I needed air. Mama's porch was the kind of place where your soul could breathe. She brewed sweet tea and sat beside me in her nightgown, letting me talk without interruption. I gave him everything, I said. I thought if I stayed kind, if I prayed harder, if I kept showing up, he'd come back. Mama nodded, sipping her tea. I can't even sit in my pew anymore. It's like she's taken over every part of my life. And the church just let it happen. Baby, Mama said gently. You can't make a man stay where he don't want to be. But don't you ever let another woman move you out of the space God placed you in. Those words wrapped around me like armor. But it wasn't enough to stop what came next. The next Sunday I arrived early, wore my favorite green dress, held my head high, sat in my seat. She walked in 5 minutes before service started, stood at the end of the pew and stared at me, like she was waiting. I didn't move. Eventually she sat across the aisle. Daryl followed behind her and did the same. The sermon that day was about forgiveness. Pastor Gerald quoted Ephesians, spoke of grace, talked about how true strength is in the release. I didn't hear much of it. I kept thinking about how she smiled during every verse, how he nodded like it was meant for him. After service, Pastor Gerald asked if I'd help lead the women's prayer circle that Wednesday. I hesitated, but then I thought of Mama's words, so I said yes. Wednesday came. The fellowship hall was full, more women than usual. Word had gotten out that Marissa was officially joining the women's ministry. Of course she was. I started the prayer circle like I always had. Shared scripture. Offered reflections. Then I opened the floor. Sister Bernice shared about her husband's knee surgery. Jasmine asked for prayer over her teenage son. Even Marissa spoke up. She said, "I just want to thank the Lord for leading me here. I've felt more love in the last 3 weeks than I've felt in years." The women all amened and clapped. Then she looked at me, dead in the eyes. "And I want to thank Tasha especially," she said, "for showing me what quiet strength looks like. You're an example I hope to follow." That was it. That was the moment. I broke. I stood up. "Can I speak?" Heads turned. "First, I'd like to thank y'all for coming tonight. This group has meant a lot to me over the years. Y'all have prayed me through grief, through sickness, through more than you'll ever know." I paused. And I want to say this with love, but also with truth, because silence in the face of sin isn't holiness, it's complicity. The room tensed. I've watched a woman walk into this church, sit in my seat, flirt with my husband, and make herself a fixture in a place I helped build. And the most painful part? Nobody said a word. Marissa's smile cracked. She didn't steal Daryl from me, he gave himself away. But what she's tried to steal from me is peace. And I won't let her have that too. Pastor Gerald stood in the corner, silent, watching. So to anyone here who thinks I'm being dramatic or unchristian, I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for discernment. Because not everything wrapped in scripture is holy. And not every smiling face is your sister. Silence. Not a breath. I looked right at her. "You may have taken my seat, but you will never take my voice." I left the circle and walked straight out of the fellowship hall. As I opened the door to my car, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, expecting Daryl. But it wasn't him. It was Pastor Gerald. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "In private." I narrowed my eyes. "About what?" He looked over his shoulder, then back at me. "There's something you don't know about Marissa." And just like that, the story changes. What is Pastor Gerald hiding? What secret could turn all of this upside down? Subscribe now and stay tuned, because what happens next will leave your jaw on the floor. The ride to Pastor Gerald's office felt like walking through fog. Everything was silent, thick, uneasy. He didn't say a word as we moved past the empty classrooms and dim hallway leading to the back of the church. The carpet muted our footsteps. My heart, however, thudded loud and fast. I didn't know if I was angry, scared, or just plain tired. He unlocked his office door, pushed it open, and motioned for me to come in. The lights were low. His Bible sat open on his desk next to a half-drunk bottle of water. Framed photos of his wife and grandkids lined the wall. Everything felt too calm for what I had just been through. "I wasn't sure whether to tell you this," he said, settling into his chair with a sigh. "But after tonight, I think you need to know." I sat down slowly across from him, trying to still my hands. He folded his fingers. "Do you know how long I've been pastoring New Hope?" 33 years, I said. "You told us last Easter." He nodded. "And in all that time I've seen folks come and go. Seen marriages fall apart, families heal, and people fall into temptation. What I've learned is that evil doesn't always kick in the door. Sometimes it just slides into a pew." I leaned forward, barely breathing. Marissa's name sounded familiar when Daryl first introduced her. But I couldn't place it. So I made a few calls to an old friend in Baton Rouge. I blinked. Why? Because she didn't just move here to start fresh, he said. She moved here to disappear. What? She was married before. Twice, in fact. Both ended badly. The first husband died, under strange circumstances. A fall down the stairs, they said. The second one, well, he's still alive, but their divorce nearly split his church in two. I shook my head stunned. You're telling me she has a pattern? I'm saying Marissa knows exactly what she's doing, Pastor Gerald said. She shows up, finds someone vulnerable, inserts herself into their life, and by the time people realize what's happening, it's already too late. My stomach twisted. Does Daryl know any of this? I doubt it, he said. But that's why I called you in. Because I don't think this is just about you and your husband anymore. I think Marissa has bigger plans. I felt dizzy. Bigger plans. I repeated. She's been asking a lot of questions, he continued. About leadership roles. About the church budget. About whether we'd ever consider hiring new ministry staff. But she's only been here a month, I said, voice shaking. Exactly, Pastor Gerald replied. And you've seen how fast she's gotten everyone on her side. The women's ministry. The choir. Even the deacons. I leaned back stunned. So what do I do? You pray, he said. But you also stay sharp. Stay present. She wants you out of the way. Don't give her the satisfaction. I stood up slowly. You believe me now? He looked me in the eye. I do. But now you need to decide. Are you going to fight or are you going to fold? I didn't answer right away. But inside me something finally clicked into place. The next few days I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell Daryl what Pastor Gerald had said. I watched. I listened. And I waited. I started showing up early to meetings. Speaking up more in Bible study. Sitting right back in my pew every Sunday like I never left. And oh, Marissa noticed. The following Wednesday she pulled me aside in the parking lot. Tasha, she said sweetly. I've been sensing some tension between us. I raised an eyebrow. Tension. I just think as women of faith we should be building bridges, not walls. That's funny, I said, folding my arms. Because I don't recall building anything. But I do remember having something torn down. Her smile faltered. I took a step closer. Let me make this real plain, I said. You may think you've got everyone fooled. But I see you. And I'm not going anywhere. He paused, then smiled again, only this time it was tighter. Sharper. We'll see, she said softly. The final straw came on a Sunday morning 2 weeks later. Pastor Gerald announced that he'd be stepping down in a few months due to health concerns. A wave of surprise rippled through the congregation. I sat stunned. But not Marissa. She leaned over and whispered something in Daryl's ear. And then she smiled. I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. As suddenly I understood. She wasn't just here for my husband. She was here to take the whole church. That afternoon I went home and logged into our shared bank account. I hadn't checked it in weeks. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, unsure of what I was even looking for. But then I saw it. A $3,000 withdrawal. Marked, Consulting Services, M. Rivers. My blood turned to ice. She wasn't just his affair. She was in our finances. She was already in his plans. And if I didn't do something fast, she'd be in everything we built. I sat there staring at the bank statement for what felt like hours. $3,000. Labeled Consulting Services, M. Rivers. Marissa's last name. She wasn't just creeping into our marriage, our church, our community. She was in our wallets. The woman who took my seat, took my husband, and nearly took my peace was now officially billing us for it. Like this was business. And maybe to her, it was. I didn't say anything right away. I needed more than one transaction to make a move. I needed the whole picture. So I pulled out our bank records for the past 3 months. I clicked through every line, scanned every detail. That's when I saw it. Started slowly, $250 here. $600 there. A $1000 charge labeled, event planning. Daryl had been slowly funding something behind my back. I wasn't on all the accounts, but this joint one? This one had breadcrumbs all over it. And I wasn't about to ignore the trail. That night I waited until Daryl went to sleep. His snoring came soft and steady, like he had no weight on his conscience. I slipped into the guest room and opened the laptop he used for church planning. Password? Easy. Faith 21. I went straight to his documents folder. A file popped out at me, NHC Future Vision. I clicked it, and what I saw felt like a slap in the face. It was a pitch deck. A full-blown PowerPoint presentation labeled, New Hope Church Expansion Strategic Growth Proposal, co-led by Daryl and Marissa Rivers. Co-led. Her name was beside his. It included a mock website, new branding, leadership bios, and her photo, Marissa, titled as Associate Director of Ministry Growth. My own husband was planning a rebrand of the church. With her. Without me. And the worst part? He hadn't even told Pastor Gerald yet. According to one slide, they were going to present a new vision to the leadership board in July. That was a month away. They were counting on Pastor Gerald being too sick or too tired to push back. They were waiting for the torch to fall, and planned to catch it together. I needed help. I printed every document I could and put it all in a folder. Then the next morning I knocked on Pastor Gerald's front door. His wife, Sister Lillian, answered in her robe. Tasha, is everything okay? No, ma'am, I said. But it will be. Pastor Gerald took his time reading the documents. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. I knew she had ambition, he muttered. But I didn't know she had audacity. She and Daryl were planning to gut the church from the inside out, I said. And they were using church funds to do it. He nodded slowly. This goes beyond betrayal. This is spiritual theft. I felt tears welling. What do we do? He stood steadier than I'd seen him in weeks. We bring it to the board. The emergency board meeting was called for the following Thursday. Only senior leaders were invited. I wasn't technically allowed in. But Pastor Gerald told me to come early and wait in the library next door. From my chair by the door I could hear voices rise and fall. Daryl's voice was loud, defensive. Marissa's voice stayed sugary sweet, like a child trying to sell lemonade. But Pastor Gerald's voice thundered like it hadn't in years. Like a man remembering his strength. I trusted you, Daryl, I heard him say. And you brought in a stranger who tried to sell our sanctuary like real estate. Then the room fell silent. Footsteps followed. The door creaked open. It was Daryl. His face pale. You told them? He asked, eyes dark. I showed them, I said, standing. You left a trail. I just followed it. She manipulated me, he said, voice low. I wasn't thinking straight. I laughed, bitter. No, Daryl. You were thinking selfish. You just didn't think I'd fight back. She's gone, he muttered. They asked her to step down. She left before the meeting even ended. And you? I asked. He looked down. I offered to resign. And did they accept? He hesitated. Not yet. But I don't think they'll stop me. I wouldn't either. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I walked past him. I didn't need closure. I needed distance. The next Sunday I arrived early. Not to make a statement, but because I wanted to sit in my seat and feel peace again. The pew was empty. The sanctuary was quiet. And for the first time in months I felt something I hadn't felt in ages. Stillness. Not victory. Not pride. Just stillness. I opened my Bible and laid it in my lap. Looked out at the stained glass dove. The same dove that had watched me love. Pray. Break. Heal. And then I saw her. Not Marissa. Her daughter. She couldn't have been more than 10. Standing outside the sanctuary doors with a woman I didn't recognize. Looking lost. Looking scared. I stepped out and asked, "Can I help you?" The woman nodded. Her mother asked us to bring her here. She left town, and didn't want to take her with. I froze. She left her child? The woman sighed. Said she needed to start fresh, again. dropped her off with a friend, told us this was her church. I looked down at the little girl. Big brown eyes. Small hands. Clutching a note. Read. I know I'm not good. But she deserves better. Maybe you can help her be better than me. The girl reached out and grabbed my hand. Tightly. And just like that, everything changed. This wasn't just a story of a woman taking my seat or my husband. It was now a story of what I'd do with the one thing she left behind. A child. And that's the end of the first story, but the beginning of something much deeper. If you want more jaw-dropping stories about faith, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to like, comment, share, and most of all, subscribe for the next powerful journey. Because sometimes the story you thought was over is just getting started.